The mountain path, the crystal peaks of Mount Ethros, gleamed like frozen lightning against the dawn sky as Finn Blackwood adjusted his heavy pack and continued his climb. At 28, the human chef had spent the last 5 years wandering the borderlands between the mortal kingdoms and the mystical dragon territories, searching for ingredients that existed nowhere else in the known world. His weathered leather journal contained recipes passed down from his grandmother, each one calling for herbs and spices that grew only in the most dangerous places. Today's quest had brought him dangerously close to the Dragon Queen's domain. The morning air carried whispers of ancient magic, and every instinct told him to turn back. But the midnight orchids he sought loomed only on these treacherous slopes, and his grandmother's voice seemed to echo in the wind, urging him forward. With the same determination that had made her the most celebrated chef in 3 kingdoms. An unexpected discovery. Finn had just spotted the telltale silver petals of a midnight orchid when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. Not the roar of an adult dragon, which would have sent him running, but something far more heartbreaking. The pitiful mewling of what sounded like abandoned young, carried on the mountain wind like a cry for help, following the sound against his better judgment. Finn discovered 4 dragon hatchlings huddled beneath an overhanging rock formation. They were no larger than house cats, their scales dull with hunger and exhaustion. Each bore the distinctive markings of royal bloodline spiraling patterns in gold and silver that marked them as children of the great Queen Velania herself. The smallest one, with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue, looked up at Finn with eyes ancient beyond its years. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in his mind, weak but desperate. "Please," came the whisper-soft thought. "So hungry, cold, Mother cannot see us anymore." The healing power of food. Finn's heart clenched at the desperation in that small voice. Despite knowing that harboring royal dragon young could mean his death, he couldn't walk away from their obvious suffering. He quickly set up his portable cooking kit, a masterwork of human engineering that had served him well through countless adventures. From his carefully preserved supplies, he pulled ingredients for his grandmother's famous healing stew, a recipe that had once nursed him back from the brink of death after a terrible fever. Wild mountain herbs, dried comfort roots, golden broth powder made from the bones of grass-fed cattle, and a secret blend of spices that seemed to warm the soul itself. As the stew began to simmer, the hatchlings crept closer, drawn by the rich aroma that spoke of comfort and care. Their scales began to brighten slightly, and Finn felt their collective consciousness touch his mind with something like wonder. "Smells like safety," one of them whispered mentally. "Like home should feel." Building trust when the stew was ready, Finn ladled it into 4 small bowls he'd carved from driftwood during his travels. He set them before the hatchlings and stepped back, allowing them space while staying close enough to offer comfort. They approached cautiously at first and began to eat with increasing enthusiasm. The transformation was remarkable. With each spoonful, their scales grew brighter, their posture straightened, and their mental voices grew stronger and clearer. The largest hatchling, whose scales held flecks of emerald and copper, fixed Finn with an intense stare. "You have the heart fire," it said, its mental voice filled with awe. "We can see it burning bright within you. Mother lost hers long ago. The cold palace made it dim." Finn didn't understand what they meant by heart fire, but he felt a deep connection forming with these young creatures. As they finished eating, they began to relax around him, sharing fragments of their story through their unique mental link. They were the children of Queen Velania, hatched in the crystal spires of the royal palace high above. But palace life had been cold and formal, filled with endless lessons and protocols that left no room for the simple comfort they craved. Their mother, bound by centuries of tradition and the weight of her crown, had become distant and unreachable. The flight to freedom. We heard the wind speaking of the warm-hearted one. The purple-scaled hatchling explained, curling up against Finn's leg with a contented sigh. It sang of someone who could heal the hungry places inside us that the cold palace food could never touch. The other three nodded in agreement, their scales now glowing with health and vitality. They told him how they had slipped away from there, guardians in the pre-dawn darkness, following the wind's whispered directions to find the source of the warmth they'd sensed from afar. As the day wore on, Finn found himself completely enchanted by his small companions. They were incredibly intelligent, curious about everything, and possessed a playful nature that had clearly been suppressed in the formal atmosphere of the Dragon Court. They asked endless questions about his travels, his cooking, and the world. Beyond their mountain stronghold, "Why do you wander alone?" asked the copper-scaled one. "Don't humans need packs like wolves?" "I'm searching for something," Finn admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "My grandmother always said the perfect recipe could heal any wound, bridge any distance. I've been looking for ingredients that could create such a dish." The hatchlings exchanged meaningful glances, their mental link buzzing with private communication. Before the smallest one spoke aloud, "Maybe you've already found it." The approaching storm, as the sun began to set, painting the crystal peaks in shades of rose and gold, Finn knew their time together was limited. The Dragon Queen would soon discover her children's absence, and the consequences would be swift and terrible. He'd heard stories of Queen Velania's wrath, how she could turn mountains to glass with her fury, and freeze the hearts of those who dared cross her. But looking at the 4 small dragons now sleeping peacefully around his campfire, their bellies full and their scales glowing with contentment, Finn couldn't bring himself to regret his actions. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his endless wandering. The hatchlings had shown him something he'd been searching for without knowing it, the power of connection, of caring for others, of finding family in the most unexpected places. His grandmother's recipes weren't just about exotic ingredients. They were about the love and intention put into every dish. As the stars emerged overhead, Finn gently stroked the sleeping hatchlings and whispered, "Whatever comes tomorrow, tonight, you're safe. Tonight you're loved." High above in the crystal spires, Queen Velania paced her throne room with growing anxiety, unaware that far below, a simple human chef was about to change the course of her ancient bloodline forever. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and something else, something warm and comforting that stirred memories she'd long buried beneath the weight of her crown. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when two worlds would collide and neither would ever be the same again. The Queen's wrath dawn broke with the sound of thunder that wasn't thunder, the beating of massive wings that shook the very foundations of the mountain. Queen Velania descended from the crystal spires like a force of nature incarnate, her scales gleaming like polished obsidian in the morning light. At over 3 centuries old, she was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, her serpentine form stretching nearly 100 feet from snout to tail. Finn woke to find the hatchlings pressed close against him, trembling despite their earlier bravery. Through their mental link, he felt their mixture of love and fear for their mother, complex emotion that spoke of deep wounds beneath the surface of their royal upbringing. "She comes," whispered the purple-scaled one, whom Finn had begun thinking of as Amethyst. The cold queen seeks her lost treasures. When Velania landed, the impact sent shockwaves through the stone. Her transformation from dragon to humanoid form was fluid and mesmerizing scales, flowing like liquid metal until she stood before them as a tall, imposing woman with silver-white hair and eyes like winter storms. Her beauty was ethereal and dangerous, the kind that could drive mortals mad with longing or terror. "You will release my children immediately," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of ages. "And then you will explain why a mere human dares to lay hands upon the royal bloodline." An unexpected defense. Finn stood slowly, placing himself between the queen and her children, despite knowing how futile the gesture was. "Your Majesty," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "They came to me hungry and afraid. I only gave them food and comfort." Vilenia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the temperature around them dropped several degrees. Hungry? Impossible. The royal hatchlings are fed only the finest magical essences, prepared by the court's most skilled nutritionists. "But they weren't eating it," Finn replied gently. "Were you, little ones?" The hatchlings exchanged glances before Amethyst spoke up, her mental voice reaching both Finn and her mother. "The palace food tastes like cold duty, Mother. This human's cooking tastes like how you used to feel when you sang to us in our eggs." Vilenia's composure cracked for just an instant, revealing something vulnerable beneath her regal mask. What do you mean, how I used to feel?" "Before the council made you stop visiting us," the copper-scaled hatchling said sadly. "Before they said royal children shouldn't be coddled with lullabies and gentle touches. The warm heart human's food brings back that feeling." The test of truth. Queen Vilenia studied Finn with new intensity, as if seeing him for the first time. "Show me," she commanded. "Prepare this food that has somehow enchanted my children." Finn nodded, grateful for the chance to prove his intentions were pure. He retrieved his cooking kit and began preparing another batch of his grandmother's healing stew, acutely aware of the queen's piercing gaze following his every movement. As the familiar aromas began to fill the air, something extraordinary happened. Vilenia's stern expression began to soften, her breathing grew deeper, and a faint tremor ran through her elegant form. The smell was awakening memories she'd buried beneath centuries of royal protocol, memories of her own youth, of simpler times when love was expressed through gentle gestures rather than formal ceremonies. "What sorcery is this?" she whispered, but her voice lacked its earlier hostility. "No sorcery, Your Majesty," Finn replied, stirring the pot with practiced ease. "Just food made with care for those who need comfort." When the stew was ready, he served it not only to the hatchlings, but also offered a bowl to their mother. Vilenia hesitated, royal protocol warring with curiosity and something deeper, a hunger she'd forgotten she possessed. The taste of memory, the first spoonful, was a revelation. Vilenia's eyes widened as flavors unlike anything in the royal kitchens flooded her senses. It wasn't just the perfect blend of herbs and spices, though those were exquisite. It was the intention behind every ingredient, the love poured into every stir of the pot, the genuine desire to nourish and comfort rather than simply provide sustenance. For the first time in decades, Queen Vilenia felt something crack open inside her chest, a warmth she'd thought lost forever. Watching her children eat with such obvious joy while occasionally looking up at her with hopeful eyes, she began to understand what they'd been trying to tell her. "How long has it been since you've eaten something prepared with love rather than obligation?" Finn asked softly, settling beside the fire as the royal family shared their simple meal. Vilenia considered the question seriously. "I cannot remember. The royal kitchens are masterful, but they follow ancient recipes designed to enhance magical power and maintain immortal health. Love was never considered a necessary ingredient. My grandmother always said that the secret ingredient in any healing recipe was the cook's genuine desire to help," Finn said, watching as the hatchlings began to play after their meal, their scales glowing brighter than he'd ever seen them. "She taught me that food without love is just fuel, but food made with care can heal wounds that magic can't touch." Forbidden's feelings as the day progressed, Queen Vilenia found herself drawn into conversations with this unusual human. His knowledge of ingredients was vast, his understanding of flavors sophisticated. But more than that, he possessed a gentleness that had been absent from her life for so long. She'd forgotten it existed. She watched him interact with her children, not as subjects to be instructed or heirs to be molded, but as young beings deserving of patience, kindness, and joy. When they asked questions, he answered thoughtfully. When they played, he joined in without concern for dignity. When they grew tired, he told them stories of his travels, his voice warm and engaging. "You have no fear of me," Velania observed. As the hatchlings napped in a contented pile between them, Finn considered this. "I respect your power, your majesty, but I'm not afraid of you. You're a mother who loves her children, even if you've forgotten how to show it. That makes you someone I can understand." The simple statement hit Velania like a physical blow. When had she last been seen as simply a mother rather than a queen? When had anyone looked past her crown to the woman beneath? "The court would be scandalized," she murmured, almost to herself. A queen sharing a meal with a common human, sitting on the ground like a commoner. Sometimes the most important things happen when we stop worrying about what others think. Finn replied, "Your children don't care about royal protocol. They just want their mother." The growing bond as evening approached, Velania made a decision that would have shocked her advisors. Instead of immediately returning to the palace, she chose to remain with this strange human and her children, drawn by something she couldn't name, but desperately needed. They talked long into the night about everything and nothing as travels. Her responsibilities, the weight of expectations, the simple pleasure of watching young ones discover the world. Finn shared stories of the diverse cultures he'd encountered, while Velania spoke of the loneliness of immortal rule and the price of maintaining ancient traditions. "Do you ever wish you could just be yourself?" Finn asked as they watched the stars wheel overhead. "I haven't been myself in so long. I'm not sure I remember who that person was," Velania admitted. "But sitting here, listening to my children's contented sleep, eating food that tastes like happiness, I'm beginning to remember fragments." Their eyes met across the dying campfire, and something electric passed between them. For a moment, species and station ceased to matter. There was only a lonely woman and a kind man, drawn together by shared care for 4 small dragons and a growing awareness of the connection forming between them. The return to reality, but fairy tales must end, and morning brought the harsh reality of their situation. The sound of approaching wing beats announced the arrival of the royal guard, sent to retrieve their missing queen. Velania rose gracefully, her royal mask sliding back into place even as her eyes lingered on Finn with newfound warmth. "You will come to the palace," she announced, though her tone was far gentler than it had been the day before. "My children refuse to eat the royal provisions, and I require time to understand what has transpired here." Finn nodded, gathering his few possessions while the hatchlings pressed close to him, clearly distressed by the thought of separation. Through their mental link, he felt their plea. Don't let them make you cold like they made Mother cold. As they prepared to depart for the Crystal Palace, Velania turned to him one final time. "Finn Blackwood," she said, using his name for the first time. "You have given my children something I thought lost forever. I am grateful." The word seemed to cost her something, as if expressing gratitude was a skill she'd had to relearn. But in that moment, seeing the genuine emotion in her ancient eyes, Finn realized that his wandering days might be coming to an end. He'd found something worth staying for, not just the hatchlings he'd grown to love, but their mother, whose heart was slowly thawing after centuries of winter. Palace of Crystal and Secrets. The Crystal Palace of Queen Velania was a marvel that defied mortal understanding. Floating weightlessly among the highest peaks, its translucent walls caught and refracted sunlight into dancing rainbows that painted every surface with living color. But beneath its beauty lay an atmosphere of rigid formality that made Finn's chest tighten with each step through its glittering corridors. The hatchlings, so vibrant and playful in the wilderness, had grown subdued. Since their return, Their scales had lost some of their newfound luster, and their mental voices carried undertones of resignation that broke Finn's heart. Palace life was already beginning to drain the joy from them, just as it had their mother over the centuries. Had been given quarters in the servants' wing, a clear message about his status, despite Valeria's obvious favor. But status mattered little when he could see how desperately the royal family needed healing. Not just the children, but their mother as well. The court's displeasure within days of Finn's arrival. The tension in the palace became palpable. The Dragon Council, a collection of ancient nobles who had advised the throne for millennia, viewed the humans' presence with barely concealed hostility. Led by Lord Drakmor, a silver-scaled dragon whose wisdom was matched only by his prejudice, they saw Finn as a threat to the natural order. This human's influence grows too strong, Drakmor warned during a private council session that Felania attended with growing irritation. The royal heirs speak of him constantly, and worse, they question our traditional methods. Yesterday, the youngest asked why palace food couldn't taste like love, as she put it. Perhaps because our traditional methods have failed them, Felania replied coolly. My children are thriving under his care in ways they never did under yours. Temporary infatuation, scoffed Councillor Tysa, her emerald scales gleaming with disdain. Humans are novelties, nothing more. But this one has overstepped boundaries. He encouraged the heirs to express emotions, to seek comfort, to question protocol. Such behavior is unseemly for the royal bloodline. Valenia felt something fierce and protective rise within her chest. My children are happy. They eat, they laugh, they learn with enthusiasm rather than mere obligation. If that is unseemly, then perhaps our protocols require examination. Forbidden moments, despite the court's disapproval, Valenia found herself drawn to the kitchens where Finn worked. His simple magic each day. She told herself it was merely to observe her children's progress. But deep down she knew the truth. She was falling for the gentle human who had awakened. Something within her that she'd thought dead forever. Their conversations during these visits grew more intimate and personal. Finn spoke of his grandmother's wisdom, his dreams of creating recipes that could heal any hurt. Valania shared memories of her youth, before the weight of the crown had settled upon her shoulders, and the expectations of immortal rule had frozen her heart. Do you know what the worst part of being queen is? She asked one evening as they watched the hatchlings play after their meal. It's not the responsibility or the isolation. It's the way everyone expects you to be perfect, unchanging, untouchable. I haven't been allowed to make a mistake or show weakness in 3 centuries. That sounds exhausting, Finn replied, his hand almost touching hers where it rested on the counter. No wonder you forgot how to feel. I didn't forget, Valenia whispered, her voice barely audible. I had to choose between feeling and surviving. Queens who show emotion are seen as weak, vulnerable to manipulation. So I buried my heart so deep, I thought it had died. But it didn't die, Finn said softly, finally letting his fingers brush against hers. It just went to sleep, waiting for the right moment to wake up. The touch sent electricity through both of them, a connection that transcended species and status. For a moment, they were simply 2 lonely souls who had found something precious in each other. The revelation of Soul Sighted was Amethyst, the smallest and most perceptive of the hatchlings, who finally explained what they'd been trying to tell the adults all along. During one of their evening meals, she looked up at Finn with those ancient eyes and spoke in her clear mental voice. Mother, you need to understand what the warm heart human really is, she said. He has the soul sight, the gift the ancient dragons possessed before we became obsessed with power and protocol. Valeria stiffened. Soul sight is a myth, little one. A legend from the old stories. No, Mother, the copper-scaled hatchling joined in. We can see it when he looks at us. He sees the hurting places inside, and knows exactly how to heal them. That's why his food works when nothing else does. He cooks not just for our bodies, but for our spirits. Finn looked confused. I don't understand. I'm just a cook who learned to pay attention to what people really need. Exactly, said the emerald-scaled hatchling. Soul sight isn't magic in the way dragons usually think of it. It's the ability to see beyond the surface, to understand what truly nourishes the heart. You have it naturally, that's why you could. Tell we needed love, not just food. The revelation hit Valenia like a thunderbolt. The ancient texts spoke of dragons who possessed soul sight, beings who could heal emotional wounds and bring joy to the despairing. But that gift had been lost when their society became focused on power rather than connection. If Finn truly possessed this ability, the council will never accept this, she whispered, but her eyes held a new understanding of the man before her. The ultimate test Lord Drakmor's patience finally reached its limit. During a formal court session, he presented Valenia with an ultimatum that shook the very foundations of the palace. Your Majesty, he announced before the assembled nobility, the council has voted. This human's presence has become a danger to our way of life. The royal heirs grow more rebellious each day, questioning traditions that have maintained our civilization for millennia. He must be removed immediately, or we will be forced to take more drastic measures. The threat was clear. Valenia could lose her throne if she continued to protect Finn. The council had the power to depose a ruler they deemed unfit, especially if her judgment was clouded by what they saw as an inappropriate attachment to a lesser species. And what of my children's well-being? Valenia asked, her voice dangerously quiet. They have thrived under his care as never before. The royal heirs will adapt, Tysa declared coldly. Better they learn discipline than be coddled by human sentiment. It was then that Finn stepped forward, his decision made. Your Majesty, he said formally, I won't be the cause of division in your realm. If my presence threatens your rule, I'll leave willingly. No! The cry came from all four hatchlings simultaneously, their mental voices ringing with desperation. Don't let the cold ones win. Don't let them freeze your heart again, Mother. The choice of love standing in that crystal throne room, surrounded by centuries of tradition and expectation. Queen Valenia faced the most important decision of her immortal life. She could choose duty, maintain her throne, and return to the cold perfection that had defined her rule. Or she could choose love, not just for Finn, but for the warmth and joy he had brought back to her family. Looking at her children's desperate faces, seeing the genuine love and hope in Finn's eyes, feeling her own heart beating with emotions she'd thought lost forever, Valenia made her choice. Lord Drakmor, she said, rising from her throne with regal dignity intact, I hereby dissolve this council and reject your ultimatum. Finn Blackwood will remain in this palace not as a servant, but as my equal partner in raising my children, and if he'll have me, as my chosen consort. The gasps of shock echoed through the throne room, but Valenia continued undaunted. For 3 centuries, I have ruled with cold perfection, and what has it brought us? Children who couldn't eat, couldn't laugh, couldn't love. A court so obsessed with protocol that we forgot the very joy that makes life worth living. She stepped down from her throne and took Finn's hand in front of the entire court. This human has given me back my heart, my children their happiness, and our bloodline. A future filled with warmth rather than duty. If that threatens our way of life, then perhaps our way of life needs to change. New beginnings. The months that followed were tumultuous but transformative. Some of the older council members left in disgust, but younger dragons began to speak of the changes with cautious optimism. The royal children flourished under their parents' combined care, growing into confident, joyful beings who would one day rule with both strength and compassion. Finn found himself adapting to palace life in ways he'd never imagined. Teaching, not just cooking, but the principles of soul sight to any who would listen. His kitchens became a place of warmth and laughter, where dragons learned that true nourishment came from connection as much as sustenance did. But perhaps the most beautiful transformation was in Velania herself. No longer the cold, untouchable queen, she had become a ruler who led with both wisdom and heart. Her people, seeing their queen's happiness reflected in her children's joy, began to understand that strength could coexist with tenderness. On quiet evenings, when the palace settled into peaceful rest, Velania and Finn would sit together watching their children play, marveling at the journey that had brought them together. A wandering chef seeking rare ingredients had found something far more precious a family, a love that transcended species, and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful magic was simply caring for others. Do you ever regret giving up your wandering? Velania asked one such evening, her head resting against his shoulder. Finn smiled, watching Amethyst teach her siblings a new game, while their scales glowed with contentment. How can I regret finding exactly what I was searching for all along? My grandmother always said the perfect recipe could heal any wound. She just never told me that sometimes you become part of the recipe yourself. As the stars emerged over the Crystal Palace, the Dragon Queen and her human love knew they had created something entirely new. A family built on understanding rather than tradition. A kingdom that valued joy as much as power, and a love story that would be remembered long after the mountains themselves had crumbled to dust. The wandering chef's journey had finally come to its perfect end, in the arms of a queen who had learned to love again and surrounded by children who would carry that love into the future of their kind. The end